Production by
Michael Lofton.
Shower me with grace when you see me sinning. Shower me with love when you see me running. Shower me with grace when you see me sinning. Shower me with love when you see me running. See me running. See me running. See me running. I move by this Eucharistic, visionary mystic, Mary the mistress, the patristic, the Holy Ghost, and the gift of Christmas. St. Luke is journalistic, God the Father's characteristic, the enemy consistent, egotistic, hedonistic, but scripture was twisted, burn like citrus and vinegar. Father Ripper, deliver her from a sin and curse. I might be young, but buyers are starting riot for miles with sleeping giants like St. Thomas, Aquinas, the finest of writings that fit for your highness. Spiritual dryness of righteous, take a vows to St. Paul and Timothy and Titus. His Excellency Bishop Athanasius Schneider on fire with minor desire to preach to the choir. Let's go.
Here we go. You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussion, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Welcome back, y'all. Just had the debate with Swan and Father. Went really well. Very, very fun. Yeah, so that was Fawaz at the beginning. And he'll be doing a whole song to it, so... looking forward to that. Yeah, he did mention Father Ripper and Father Athanasius Schneider, if you didn't hear at the end, too. Really good stuff. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Yeah, Kyle, I see your question. That was Fawaz Yassi from Holy 40 Project. I'll play one of our skits, midstream. Give me a quick break, and so you'll see Fawaz again. But yeah, he's Elijah Yassi's brother. He has his channel Holy 40 Project, Tradcath Skits. I'll put a link to those. But yeah, he is a man of many talents, so wanted to play that as the intro. Well, a lot going on today. Not sure if I'll be able to get to it all. There's a lot here. And by the way, somebody's saying it's blurry. What's blurry? Because, I don't know. Everything on my end looks good. Let me get a sip of my sweet tea here in my R&T cup. You can't really see the logo right now because of the tea. But, yeah, Trent, I think it might just be your stream because, it's coming clear on my end, but y'all let me know in the chat if it's okay. I see y'all are saying it's clear. All right, very good. All right, so what I wanted to do is interact a little bit with Dr. Taylor Marshall and his response today to the question of whether or not Archbishop Vigano, in fact, here's the title. Did Vigano say Pope Francis is the Antichrist? Can the Pope be the Antichrist? Rome or Jerusalem, stuff like that. Okay, so he's interacting with good stuff, and I appreciate that Dr. Marshall was interacting with my material. I'm assuming he doesn't say me explicitly, but it's painfully obvious he's trying to interact with what I was saying, either on my own stream or whenever I was on with Timothy Gordon, because I was the one raising this question based on something that Vigano said in his article on LifeSite News. So I appreciate Dr. Marshall trying to interact with it, but it appears to me that Dr. Marshall didn't actually listen or watch most of what I said. It's very clear that he probably just maybe watched a minute, if that, or at least just saw the title of the video, and that was it. Which, oddly enough, he then tells us during the stream that we need to be more careful and read Vigano more carefully, and yet he doesn't actually listen to us very carefully. So that's one of my concerns here. But I mean, again, I'm having to assume that he's trying to interact with me because I don't know anybody else who is doing videos asking this question other than myself when I was on my stream and then when I was on Timothy Gordon's stream. Who else was asking this question? I'm not aware of anybody, so I'm quite certain he's talking about me. But then he was trying to engage the issue of the indefectibility of the church, which is exactly what I've also been talking about. So it's very, very clear he was trying to interact with my material, but once again, I'm going to show you why he did not do a good enough job and why I'm considering it a non-response, especially because of the fact that the very part from Vigano's letter that I was questioning, he skips over and addresses everything around it except the very thing that I made a big deal about, which tells me he couldn't have watched any more than a minute of my stream because I spent the vast majority of my time focusing on a particular part in what Vigano was saying. So it was very disappointing to see that. He danced all around it. He spoke about everything else except that. Moreover, my question for Dr. Marshall was not, what does he think about Vigano? Right? My question was to Vigano, what does he mean? Because I really don't care what does Dr. Marshall think Vigano means. I don't care about that. I want to know what Vigano means when Vigano said what he said in LifeSite News, which we'll look at again here in a moment. Which I'm fine if Vigano came out and said, no, Michael, you misrepresented me. You misread me. Here's what I was trying to get at with that part. Cool. No sweat off my back. If Vigano just says, no, you're misunderstanding, maybe I should have been a little bit more clear. Here's what I'm saying. Great. Wonderful. We can move forward. But I just need that clarity. And that's all I was asking for is clarity. I wasn't asking what Dr. Marshall's opinion is on what Vigano was saying, however. But that's what we got. What I did ask Dr. Marshall directly was, what does he believe as far as, does he believe Pope Francis will be the head of a true church and a false church simultaneously? I did ask him that, and I didn't get an answer. So the problem is, I asked Dr. Marshall an explicit question. He doesn't answer the question that's directed at him. But then I ask a question for Vigano, and not for Dr. Marshall, but he answers the question for Vigano. Not helpful. But it is at least nice that Dr. Marshall did claim, sure, we can't claim that the Pope will be the Antichrist, which I'm glad to hear that. That's wonderful. Great. That gets that, but that still doesn't get to my question for Dr. Marshall, and that is, okay, but could this true Pope, maybe not being the Antichrist, could this true Pope be the head of a true church and a false church simultaneously? Kind of, what Anne Emmerich was getting at with this true church and a false church. Could they both be headed by the Pope? That's what I was asking. I still haven't received an answer. But I am at least happy to hear that he would say, sure, the Pope can't be the Antichrist. I still have a question mark, however, on what would Vigano say? Because everything that Dr. Marshall addressed was everything surrounding everything but the very part that makes it seem like Vigano is saying the Antichrist is going to sit on the chair of St. Peter. That's the problem. And I know that he's familiar with it because he then went on to talk about, well, Archbishop Vigano affirms indefectibility. Well, great. Read the next sentence. That's the very one that is concerning, as I'm going to show y'all here in a moment. But he didn't touch on it. And as I said previously, or I had already addressed that in my show with Gordon, which tells me he's not listening. He didn't really watch it. I already addressed that. Great. You affirmed the indefectibility of the church. Great. You're now in the company of Martin Luther. So did he. He just redefines where the center of the church is, effectively, and what the church is. So just because you say, I affirm the indefectibility of the church, doesn't mean you couldn't then say that the Pope is going to be the Antichrist, which is the very next sentence that it seems like Vigano is saying that. I don't know that for sure. That's why I'm asking for clarification. And that is what I was doing previously. So I says, I bet Lofton could not handle a debate with Trad Patrick. Who is Trad Patrick? I've never heard of Trad. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't want to debate whoever Trad Trad Patrick is. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, here's what we do see at the beginning of the stream. Let me pull it up here. And it looks like he's a troll. Let me go ahead and boot him because he's evidently calling me a loser. All right, let me knock him out of there. Yeah, Mathema, debate me, bro. I kind of get the impression that's who we were dealing with there. Okay. Let me share my screen and share the audio. Let's start at the very beginning because already it's a non-starter because he poisons the well with the very beginning. He says there are people out there accusing Vigano and lying about Vigano. Wait a moment. Who's he talking about? Who is accusing Vigano and lying about Vigano? Were there some other videos where people were questioning this matter about Vigano other than myself and Timothy Gordon? Were there some other videos I'm unaware of or other articles or something? Maybe, but I haven't heard of them. I'm pretty sure there weren't any. So I'm pretty sure he's talking about me, but I didn't accuse. Go back and watch. I kept saying over and over, it seems like this is what he's saying, and I need some clarity, because if he's not going to clarify this, how then can he criticize Vatican II for not being clear? Or how then can he criticize Pope Francis for not clarifying his statements? Y'all heard me say that, right? By doing that, I'm saying I'm not accusing. I'm saying it sure seems like this is the case. So I'm needing some clarification. And if I've misunderstood and he's not saying the Antichrist is going to sit in the chair of St. Peter, great. No sweat off my back. Less issues that I have to deal with now. I can move on to other issues that I can address. Right? But if I am hearing something that is troubling like that, I am going to address it to try to balance some of it out, because a lot of people are listening to these voices for answers, and I think they're getting a commentary that's going a little too far, and I'm just trying to bring it in a little bit. But if I've misunderstood, I have no problem doing another show and saying, hey, Archbishop Vigano clarified. He doesn't believe that, the Antichrist is going to sit in the chair of St. Peter. I have no problem doing that. I don't know if we're going to get one, though. I don't think we'll get one at all, but we'll see. But here it is where he muddies the water, poisons the well, and accuses me of accusing Vigano. Again, it's implied. He doesn't mention me by the name, but I don't know who else he could be talking about. He accuses that other people are accusing Vigano, and he says they're lying about Vigano. Let's play it.
Recently say that Pope Francis is the Antichrist. Did he claim that a valid pope?
And I never said that Vigano said Pope Francis is the Antichrist. I never said that. I said that according to what he wrote in LifeSite News, it looks like he's saying that the Antichrist will reign in the chair of St. Peter. I've said that. I've made that very, very clear. I don't know how anybody who actually was paying attention to what I was saying and really heard what I was saying would come to that conclusion. Let's look at it again. At La Salette, Our Lady warned us Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. This is the part he read, and he stopped right there. Curious that he stopped right there, because my very argument was that it's the part after that is the most concerning. It will not be the Holy Church, indefectible by the promises of Christ, that will lose the faith. Wonderful. He affirms the indefectibility of the church. So does Martin Luther. It will be the sect that occupies the see of the most blessed Peter, in which today we see propagating the anti-gospel in the New World Order. What does that mean? Rome will become the seat of the Antichrist, and it will be the sect that occupies the see of the most blessed Peter. I might be misreading and misunderstanding, but it just sounds like he's saying the Antichrist will have his seat in the see of the most blessed Peter. Again, I could be misreading, but it just sure seems that way. Let me block another troll here. I sure seem to bring them out whenever I do any videos questioning some of these things. It's funny. All right. Well, looks like all the trolls are really coming out. Let me block some more. Trying to have a effective discussion here, and they're trying to derail it. Okay. So again, this is the part that is in question. What Marshall does, as you're going to see in a little bit, is he engages this part. He even briefly alludes to this part. He does not touch on this part. And that was what I was addressing. And that's what I made a big deal over. And that's what I was asking for clarification from Vigano on, not from Taylor Marshall. I don't care what Taylor Marshall thinks Vigano said. Now, you could say, well, I mean, Taylor Marshall's not doing the video for you. He's just answering it for others in case they're wondering what Vigano says. Fair enough. But Taylor Marshall isn't the interpretive authority of Vigano. Vigano is the interpretive authority on Vigano. Vigano needs to come out and give us an explanation, not Dr. Marshall. And if Dr. Marshall is going to comment on it, which is perfectly fine, if he's going to comment on it and say, here's my opinion of what Vigano is saying, that's great. But please deal with what's actually being said. Don't dance around it and speak about everything except the very thing that we're questioning. The very sentence that I was questioning was ignored the entire time. Okay, let's listen.
A successor of St. Peter with full jurisdiction over the church could also be the Antichrist. You might be surprised, maybe you're not. There are people out there actually accusing.
Heard that? Accusing. Who are these people accusing? It can't be me. So where are these other videos or articles?
Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano of these errors. Now, when I did a show last week on Archbishop Vigano,
and later on is where he's going to actually say that people are lying about Vigano as well. But here he just mentions accusation. All right, let's play a little bit more. Let me just start from, I want to get to the point where he's going over La Salette. Let's start right around here, right after the prayer.
I'm going to read it again. He mentions the word Antichrist 3 times in his statement. Now, this is important because he relates Antichrist to things that are going on in the church right now. And as we look into what Antichrist means in the Bible and in church history, you'll realize that Antichrist is actually a theological label. We also learn in the Bible there will be many Antichrists, and that Antichrist with a capital A, when you say the Antichrist, actually refers to the Apocalypse chapter 13, the land beast and the sea beast. And we'll go into that. I've prepared a whole talk on that as well. Okay, so what did Archbishop Vigano say? Well, there's 3 quotes. The first quote is about...
There's 3 quotes. In all 3 quotes, he ignores the very one that I'm interacting with. The very one that I'm questioning. Unintentionally, intentionally, I don't know. I don't know the motives, and I'm not going to make a judgment on the motives, but he's not addressing it.
Antichristic counter magisterium. Vigano.
Now, that was the part that Timothy Gordon raised, the anti-magisterium, which is a little concerning, but that's not the biggest one, right? I could see somebody putting a orthodox spin on that one. And notice, by the way, that we're having to now put orthodox spins on things that Vigano is saying. Remind you of somebody? Remind you of somebody? Well, that should remind you of Pope Francis, how we have to put orthodox spins on. Well, now we're having to do it with Vigano, so... Okay, so that part I don't care about. That was the part that Timothy Gordon raised, and that's fine. But you'll see in the video where I'm doing a show with him, I say that's not the most troubling part, and I then go on to read the troubling part.
It says the Holy See has deliberately renounced the supernatural mission of the church, making itself the servant of the New World Order and Masonic globalism in an antichristic counter magisterium. End quote. Well, I think it should be obvious to all of us that if something is counter-magisterium, that is, it's against the teaching of Jesus Christ, the 12 apostles, the one holy...
And by the way, somebody says if Taylor Marshall won't debate Michael online, they should just grab a beer. We don't even have to have a debate. We can just have a stream talking about it. But yeah, sure, I would definitely grab a beer with Marshall and talk to him. I have a lot of concerns about what he's saying, but sure, we could definitely have a charitable conversation. I believe his heart is in the right place. As I've said before, I think he loves Christ. I think he loves the church. I think he's intending well. I'm just concerned about the solution that he's presenting because I think it actually undermines the Catholic faith. That's all. I mean, what kind of person would I be if I just laugh and joke and I'm friends with somebody? Not that we are. I'm just saying if we were. But then I don't tell them, hey, but what you're saying is undermining our faith. I got to say something, especially when it's being done publicly and thousands of people are watching this and they're going to him for solutions and answers, and they're being pointed in a direction that I don't think he wants to take them, but they're going there. I just had somebody in the stream 2 days ago. Well, no, it was yesterday. They said, Michael was really bringing me to the Catholic Church, but then I watched Taylor Marshall's video and I decided to remain Orthodox. It's true. And some people have left the Catholic Church after seeing this content. I hear it a fair amount of the time. So it's unfortunate. Again, I'm not saying that's intended. I'm just saying, objectively speaking, that's happening because of some of the things that are being said, and that's what I'm concerned about. But sure, we could definitely have a nice chat and a beer and all that stuff.
Catholic and Apostolic Church, that is antichristic. It's against Christ. Antichrist, we need to understand, means against Christ. In Greek, it can also have the nuance of in place of Christ.
Let me fast forward this part. He's talking about the counter magisterium.
Antichrist by Vigano. Quote, millions of faithful are disgusted by the countless scandals of the pastors, by the betrayal of their mission, by the desertion of those who by holy orders are called to bear witness to the holy gospel and not to support the establishment of the kingdom of Antichrist. End quote. So the first time he refers to antichristic counter-magisterium, that's a tautology. Anything that's counter-magisterium is antichristic. It's against Christ. The second one, he just quotes Our Lady of La Salette. Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. And then in the third one, he says that there are those in holy orders who are supporting the establishment of the kingdom of the Antichrist.
By the way, let's stop there. The part about Our Lady of La Salette, he comments on that briefly and says that he talks about it in Infiltration, in his book Infiltration. And he mentions the 1851 message and then the later revision in 1879? Yeah, 1879 by Melanie, one of the seers. Well, as I noted in the previous stream, it does seem that that later revision that now added the part Rome will lose the faith and will become the seat of the Antichrist, because the 1851 message didn't have that. The addition was made in 1879 by Melanie. And then it is noteworthy that that edition was then put on the Index of Forbidden Books, which in his book, Infiltration, I looked it up, he does acknowledge, yes, this is on the Index of Forbidden Books. What's curious is he goes on to say, but I still accept the 1851 and the 1879 edition as valid, to use his words. Why? Well, because Pius X allegedly, hearsay, cried out La Nostra Santa whenever he read Melanie's biography. And he gives no citation, by the way. But direct quote from Pius X, no citation. As if that's somehow relevant to, as if that's an approbation to the part Rome will lose the faith, and is now saying, okay, it's not on the index, I'm removing it from the index, which was clearly not the case, right? So no citation, and his only appeal that I can tell, correct me if I'm wrong, but that I can tell in the book to try to save the Rome part, Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist, was this anecdote on Pius X, which doesn't even give us a judgment on the 1879 edition or the Index of Forbidden Books. So he then says, I accept both of them. Well, as I've already noted, if it turns out that this is authentic, no sweat off my back, Rome will lose the faith could easily refer to the city of Rome, not the Holy See, right? Which he notes later on in the video. He notes that distinction. So that's all it means. It doesn't mean that the Antichrist is going to sit on the chair of St. Peter. And of course, Taylor Marshall came out and said he denied that the Pope would ever be the Antichrist. Great. But how does this account for what Vigano was saying? Because the very part that it seems like he's saying that, Taylor Marshall never addressed. But yeah, back to the La Salette issue. I thought that was a little troubling. And no citation, nothing provided, and then it's an irrelevant anecdote to begin with to the discussion. By the way, we're going to have, me and River Run are going to have a review of Infiltration since y'all wanted one. So that's coming up. But let's continue.
All right. I think these are all obvious. I don't think you have to be a scholar or a theologian or expert in these matters. I mean, just ask yourself, quote number 1, if something is against the teaching of Christ, is it Antichrist? Yes, check. Number 2, this is a little bit more controversial. Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. First claim, Rome will lose the faith. Have you been to Rome in the last 10 years?
And as I already said in my video, and even with Timothy Gordon, Rome has clearly already lost the faith, the city of Rome. I've already said that, so.
Let me tell you what it's like. People in Rome don't go to church. It's become, sadly, a godly city. The people of Rome do not, for the most part, attend Mass every Sunday. It is not a place thriving in Catholic faith. So to say Rome will lose the faith is different than saying the Apostolic See will lose the faith, which can't happen according to Vatican I. Hopefully I'll have time to read that today.
The part that he reads from Vatican I, however, is not the Relatio, which is what I've been talking about. The part from LifeSite News that was questionable from Vigano, he doesn't address. And my counter to what Vigano was saying was not just from Vatican I itself, but from the Relatio, which is the interpretive authority behind the text. It's the interpretation of what's going on there in Vatican I. And I quoted from the Relatio, which the bishops assented to when they voted on, not the Relatio itself, but on Pastor Eternus, and also Dei Filius, right? But it was Gasser's Relatio is primarily about the Pastor Eternus. But they're voting on it in light of what Gasser's saying. And I take you to the part where Gasser is saying the chair of St. Peter is the see of unity and therefore can't fall into error. And it can't be a see of pestilence. And I'm asking, how does that line up with what we're reading here? Apparently from Vigano. It's a question. I would like it answered. It's not being interacted with. Neither the text that I was concerned about or even my counter arguments were being addressed, which again tells me he's not listening.
Rome will become the seat of the Antichrist, this Our Lady of La Salette. Now that right there is controversial. We're going to spend some time on that today. And again, I will say right here, I am not fully convinced that the church fathers actually teach that. There is.
And I agree with Dr. Marshall. I don't think there is a consensus on the idea that Rome, the city, is going to lose the faith. There are individuals who say that in the history of the church, Rome, the city. But there's no consensus here, and I agree with him. But either way it shakes down, there's no sweat off my back. If the Antichrist is reigning from Jerusalem, or if he's reigning from a pagan Rome or a Rome that's apostate, that's no sweat off my back. That's not touching on the See of Peter, right? There's a fundamental distinction there. And very technically, the Vatican's not even in Rome, right? Very technically speaking, it's its own thing. Okay. Well, notice here, though, he's addressing this part. At La Salette, Our Lady warned us Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. And he's going to give a whole apologetic defending this. But I already said, even if this part were authentic, it's that doesn't mean that the see of Peter is going to be the seat of the Antichrist. Granted. So by focusing on this is smoke and mirrors. It's muddying the waters. It's irrelevant. Who cares? Who cares? This was the part. It will be the sect that occupies the see of Most Blessed Peter. That's my question. Does it mean the Antichrist will be on the see of Peter? If there's some other way to read this, I'm perfectly fine with being corrected. I would just like to hear, okay, well, what does this mean? What is the proper interpretation to what Vigano is saying here? Because I don't see it. All right. Go back to the video here.
Is division amongst the church fathers on that point. Now, there might be a way, I think, to reconcile all church fathers on that point, but it's not clear. And then the third quote by Vigano is that there are people in holy orders who are establishing the kingdom of Antichrist. That's obvious. Just go to any Catholic news site and read articles from the past 12 to 24 months, and you will see that there are men in holy orders and even women in convents who are promoting every lifestyle, every error, every heresy that's ever been in the church. Full modernism. You yourself know out there that there are people in holy orders who are not working for Christ, that are working for the spirit of the Antichrist. All right, now why is this a big deal? Well, Vatican I. We Catholics, we believe in Vatican I. And I'm going to read to you today from Vatican I. This is the decree on infallibility. It's chapter 2.
So he's dealing with the decree. He's not dealing with Gasser's relatio. And that is the part that undermines some of the things that Taylor Marshall seems to be saying when it comes to his criticisms of Pope Francis. Apparently. I'm not saying for sure. I'm not accusing. I'm saying it seems that way, and that's why I want clarity. But again, not addressing the issues. Let's go to skip to 36:16-ish, right around here. Listen to what he says.
It's actually both. That's how persuasive the Antichrist is going to be at the end of the world. And that's the one I'm going to go with as well. So if someone were to say to me, well, when Archbishop Vigano, I'm going to take this down here. We need it in back up in the video. When Vigano says, well, the Antichrist is in the church, I mean, that's against Vatican I. I don't necessarily, if you said a valid pope is the Antichrist, yes, that's not compatible with Vatican I.
And I'm glad that he says that. I just still need to know what is Vigano saying. That's all.
Not acceptable. Not acceptable. And if Archbishop Vigano were saying that, and I don't think he is, I think it's very clear because he even defends the indefectibility of the Holy Church.
So does Martin Luther, but then Martin Luther will claim that the Pope is the Antichrist. So just talking about defending the indefectibility of the church doesn't mean you don't believe that the Pope is going to be the Antichrist, right? So that's what, wonderful. Hats off to Vigano for affirming the indefectibility of the church. So Taylor Marshall's aware of this sentence here. He's aware of this part. It will not be the Holy Church indefectible by the promises of Christ that will lose faith. Why didn't he read to us the next sentence? Because that was the part that was in question. Never touches it. Doesn't address it at all.
But if that were the case, we'd have to part with Vigano. But that's not what Vigano's saying. Anyone who's accused.
And I'm glad to hear that he would say he would part with Vigano on the matter if that's what Vigano were saying. But he's saying Vigano isn't saying it. And I'm just asking, okay, that's nice. How do I know Vigano isn't saying that in light of the text that you aren't reading? Can you explain that for me? That's all I'm asking. I've made it painfully clear.
Using that, I think they're just not reading carefully.
We're not reading carefully. Here, let's hear this again. We're not reading carefully.
I think it's very clear because he even defends the indefectibility of the Holy Church. But if that were the case, we'd have to part with Vigano. But that's not what Vigano's saying. Anyone who's accusing that, I think they're just not reading carefully.
Anyone accusing that is not reading carefully. Coming from the guy who's not listening carefully or reading carefully himself, because the very part he doesn't talk about is the very next sentence. The very thing he's accusing others of, presumably myself, is the very thing he's guilty of. Whereas I have read Vigano. I have read it carefully, and that's why I did the stream questioning it. That's all. So I just find that ironic.
I'm not reading it carefully. So if we go back to Vatican I.
All right. Move on to the 47 mark, somewhere around there. Let's start right there.
One morning he's getting dressed and he's getting ready to go say mass. And in his mind, he thinks, yeah, he didn't say it out loud. He's like, yeah, there's 8 sacraments. And the church had it wrong the whole time.
Okay, so here what he's doing is he's now talking about the case of a heretical pope, right? And he's trying to deal with Bellarmine, which I've done a whole exposition on. Y'all can watch the video I did, Contra Sedevacantism. I go over the 5 different views. Give you which opinion that I weigh in on. But I go over the other views as well. So he's trying to engage Bellarmine here in the 5 different views, especially focusing on the 1st and the 5th, on whether or not a pope can be a heretic. And, of course, the 5th is Bellarmine's view. So what he's doing is he's saying, okay, Bellarmine is saying that a manifest heretic would automatically cease to be pope. And that's true. That is Bellarmine's position. The key is manifest heretic. And here's where Dr. Marshall seems weak. Dr. Marshall thinks manifest heretic is the opposite of an occult heretic, which it is, but that's not all it is. An occult heretic is a secret heretic, somebody who maintains a heresy privately. A manifest heretic, yes, it is somebody who's publicly expressing heresy, but that's not all manifest heresy means for Bellarmine. And it's a part that he doesn't catch. And the fact that he doesn't catch it is concerning, because he's going to end up using an argument that lends itself to Sedevacantism, whether he realizes it or not. And I don't think he realizes that. I don't think he's worked through this stuff yet. I don't think he realizes the implications of what he's arguing, because what he's about to argue is exactly what you'll hear from the Sedevacantists. It's their argument. He's going to use that to try to maybe defend his position. It's just odd. But, by the way, manifest heresy for Bellarmine, you can read just the immediate context. Manifest heresy for Bellarmine is not just a public heretic. It's a heretic who's been rebuked twice by the proper authorities, per the admonition of St. Paul. You rebuke a heretic twice and then have nothing to do with them. That's a manifest heretic. Is that applicable to Pope Francis? Nope. Pope Francis hasn't given us, hasn't clearly articulated something actually heretical. And here by heretical, I'm using it in its technical sense, right? A denial of a dogma, a clear denial of a dogma. He hasn't done that. And then if he did, he hasn't been questioned and rebuked twice by the proper authorities. In this case, it would be an imperfect ecumenical council, as John of St. Thomas talks about, or the College of Cardinals, right? That hasn't happened. So for Bellarmine, he still, however, believes the Pope has to be rebuked twice. He believes that, because he already explained to us what a manifest heretic is. Somebody who has been formally rebuked twice and remains publicly obstinate in a heresy. Bellarmine tells us that. So when Bellarmine says he's then automatically loses the office, he's talking about a pope who is guilty of heresy and has been publicly rebuked by the authorities twice. It almost sounds like in Dr. Marshall's mind, if you're just a formal heretic and you express it publicly as opposed to privately, you automatically cease to be pope. That's not what Bellarmine's saying. But that is what the Sedevacantists are saying. That is exactly what the Sedevacantists are saying. That's their position. That's one of the arguments that they use to maintain the position that they do today. So the fact that he's not aware of some of these distinctions, his arguments actually lend themselves to Sedevacantism. So let's listen.
Sacraments. And he believes something heretical. In that very moment he had that belief, he would cease to be Pope. What Bellarmine says is when he becomes a manifest heretic, a public heretic.
Notice that. Marshall equates manifest with public. And though manifest heresy includes a public teaching of heresy, it's not just public. Because you could utter publicly a heresy and not be a notorious heretic or a manifest heretic. These are distinctions that you got to know. You got to know. These are distinctions that you have to be aware of, and if you're not aware of them, you're going to end up lending yourself to the Sedevacantist argument. So in his mind, he equates those things. Listen.
He says that he would, in that moment, cease to be Pope and head as he ceases to be a Christian and a member of the body of the church.
It's not what Bellarmine says. That's what the Sedevacantists say Bellarmine says, though. Just, it doesn't mean, okay, if you are now publicly teaching heresy, you automatically lose office. That's not what he said. You just read the words manifest heresy. But you have to go and read the immediate context of how he defines manifest heresy. And you'll see him in the immediate context defining manifest heresy as somebody who has been rebuked twice per the admonition of Titus, St. Paul and Titus.
So I'm going to throw something out there, a little bit controversial. It could be that you could have a man who was validly elected, validly appointed, validly serving as the Pope, as a successor of St. Peter, who loses it, loses the papacy.
It's not what Bellarmine was saying. Because for Bellarmine, he has to be rebuked twice, and you would know that he's been rebuked twice by an imperfect ecumenical council or the College of Cardinals. You would know this, right? This would be a very public thing. It's not these rebukes are not private. It would be done publicly, and he would publicly be obstinate, right? He would publicly remain in heresy. At that point, for Bellarmine, he loses office. And I think Bellarmine's wrong. I take Cajetan's view, the fourth view. But, I mean, even if Bellarmine's right, okay, again, no sweat off my back. None of that applies to Pope Francis or any of the post-conciliar popes. So, okay. Pope Francis is still the Pope, right? Now, his point here isn't to argue that Pope Francis isn't the Pope. I understand that. But just notice the argument he's using is the argument Sedevacantists used to say that Pope Francis isn't the Pope, because they will say Pope Francis has uttered this heresy, or John the 23rd uttered this heresy, and it was publicly uttered. Therefore, he immediately lost the office if he ever had it. That's one of their arguments. And you're hearing it right now from Dr. Marshall because he fails to understand proper distinctions and nuances in Bellarmine.
If Bellarmine is right when he says the fifth true opinion, if Bellarmine is right, and again, there's no dogmatic decree to say Bellarmine's right, but if Bellarmine is right on fifth true opinion, it could be that you have a real valid Pope who ceases. Now remember, a real valid Pope can cease to be a Pope if he validly resigns the papal office. This is Catholic teaching. If he dies, he ceases to be Pope. So it seems to me there are three ways a man ceases to be Pope. Number one, he dies natural human death. Actually, there's a fourth way. Number one, he dies natural death. The one that just came to my mind. Number two, he may not be dead, but he loses his mental faculties. Number three, he rationally and validly resigns the papal office. And number four, if Bellarmine is right on fifth opinion, he becomes a public manifest heretic. And in the very moment he would become a manifest heretic, he would lose the office of the papacy in the instant. Notice what Bellarmine says. Whereby he can be judged and punished by the church. Remember, a pope, as long as he's pope, can't be judged by the church. You can't get an ecumenical council big enough to judge a pope.
And this is one of the arguments that some people use against Cajetan's view, and it's very misinformed. Because Cajetan's view is not that this ecumenical council or college of cardinals, but he's primarily talking about an imperfect ecumenical council. It's not that they judge as if they are in authority over the Pope. His view is that it's actually God who judges the Pope and deposes the Pope, and it's simply the ecumenical council that declares it. That's all. They're just declaring what God has done. That's all. They're not actually sitting in judgment of him. So it's a very nuanced position. And it's called imperfect ecumenical because in order to have a perfect ecumenical council, you have to have the ratification of a pope. But in emergency situations where the pope is the very one that's in question, you have what's called an imperfect ecumenical council.
Impossible. No one can judge the first see. It's just a basic Catholic principle. But if he ceased to be the Pope by manifest public heresy, then he would lose his
manifest public heresy. You notice how Dr. Marshall is using his terms. Again, he equates manifest with public. He's not aware of the distinction. He hasn't read through this stuff carefully enough. Which, okay, that's fine. I mean, there's a million things that we haven't read. But just don't, go and comment on it. That's all.
office. He would lose the papacy and a council could condemn him. So what could happen? I'm not saying this has happened. I'm not saying it will happen. You could have a real pope who, through manifest heresy, loses the papacy and then works for and operates with the Antichrist, with the spirit of Antichrist.
I mean, I don't have a problem with, technically speaking, a pope who has defected from the faith and has lost the papacy, then going to the Antichrist or something. I mean, obviously I have a problem with it, but you know what I'm saying? Like, theoretically, I don't have a problem with this in theory. I would just say that, okay, I get it, but who really held that view is my question. That's all. But I mean, very technically speaking, what he's saying is not false. It is possible you could have that. It's not at all applicable to Pope Francis in our times right now, which he's not necessarily saying it is. He's just talking hypothetically.
Antichrist, or promotes the spirit of Antichrist. That could happen. You could also have someone who does not validly receive the office, but people think he validly received the office.
I mean, I could see that too. Somebody who, claims to be the Pope, and some people think that he's the valid Pope. The problem is it could never be somebody who has been received universally and peacefully by the whole church. That's where I would say, okay, I could see, Pope Michael over here in the United States, a couple people might think he's Pope, right? But he's never been universally and peacefully accepted by the faithful, right? I could see some random people out there saying Pope Michael is, a valid Pope, and then a figure like somebody like that end up getting in league with the Antichrist. I'm not saying Pope Michael will. I'm just using him as an example. I could see that, but that's not the same as, let's say, Pope Francis, who was universally and peacefully accepted, which is the main standard to determine, or at least it's a sure standard to determine somebody is a valid Pope, per the manualists. They even note if there was some kind of defect in the election and they weren't canonically elected, they would actually, it would be healed in the root if he is universally and peacefully accepted. So you couldn't have somebody like Pope Francis universally and peacefully accepted as the Pope, and then it turns out that a lot of people believe, the church believed he was the Pope, but it actually wasn't. No. Now you can't have that. But very technically what he's saying is true. Some people might think that this person is the Pope, and could he go and lend himself to the Antichrist? Yeah, that's possible, sure.
This is what we call in church history an anti-pope. An anti-pope. There was a pope named Pope Anacletus II. I'm going to pull him up here. Y'all should read about Pope.
And by the way, let's take a quick break here. I'm going to play the skit with myself and Fawaz. 10 signs that you might be a liberal Catholic. Here they are. I feel like after Vatican II, we opened the windows of the church to a new springtime.
I like Jesus a lot, but not the Bible version of Jesus. I like my version of Jesus much better.
I feel like papal encyclicals are longer these days because we know so much more than the church did before. Does that make sense?
I can't seem to wrap my head around objective morality. It's not how God works, and I can prove it. Because why would I feel a certain way or have certain desires if I can't act out on them?
Technically, Father James Martin is not a heretic.
I feel like we clearly have a much better understanding of morality today than the saints of the past. I mean, if you think about it, it's not like any of them had to deal with plagues, adultery, divorce, or justice. None of these things really existed until after 1962.
No, it's just that holding hands during the Our Father is the greatest sign in the liturgy that we're one body.
Every year I engage in the Laudato Si Virgin Stations of the Cross. I'm such a Pope Francis Catholic. He's like Saint Francis, but holier.
I kind of feel like Laudato Si should be used instead of the creed during the liturgy.
I beg your pardon? Magisterial authority? I don't know how any of that works. All I know is whoever said it last is what I'm going to stick with. So if the Pope gives his opinion to someone over lunch and that person leaks it to the press, I'm bound to accept it as a Catholic. No questions asked.
All right. 5-1 kills me every time. He said, no questions asked. I love the way he said that. That was hilarious. Okay, let's get back to it. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Let me share the audio. All right. Let's hear a little bit more about Bellarmine.
Antipope Anacletus II. For 8 years, Anacletus ruled in Rome. He had the majority of the cardinals supporting him.
Technically true.
Antipope Anacletus. Let me put it on the screen. You can do a little.
Originally, a minority of the cardinals elected Innocent II, but then a majority later on elected Anacletus II. Sure. Listen a little bit further, though.
Research on your own. Everybody should do their own research. Here you go. Antipope Anacletus II. He was antipope from 1130 to 1138. For 8 years, this antipope was in Rome. It says most of the Roman population supported him as the true pope. The majority of the cardinals voted for him and considered him to be the pope. So if you had lived in Rome in 1130 to 1138 and you walked around and said, hey, who's the pope? They would say, oh, Anacletus II. If you went to the cardinals and you polled most of the cardinals, they would say, oh, Anacletus II. He's the
Notice what he's focusing on. The cardinals in Rome. Notice that.
pope. Part of the confusion is that a delegation of 8 men elected Pope Innocent II.
Previous to this election, by the way.
Who was considered the real pope at this time. But the majority of the cardinals held a conclave, and they voted for Anacletus II.
After the valid election, by the way.
It almost seems that most of us, probably if we lived that time, we would have thought Anacletus II was the real pope.
If you were one of those cardinals or lived in Rome. Here's what he doesn't tell you. Probably because he doesn't know. What he doesn't tell you is the majority of Europe didn't accept this election, and the majority of Europe sided with Innocent II, who's the valid pope. He doesn't tell you that part. And what did I just say about universal and peaceful acceptance of the faithful? Is the faithful just the city of Rome and a couple cardinals? No. Universal and peaceful acceptance refers to the church as a whole. Now, normally you could look to the College of Cardinals or look to the city of Rome to determine who's the valid pope. Normally, right? But of course, when you have multiple claimants, you can't just do that in some cases. You do have to now look beyond the College of Cardinals in Rome in some of these exceptional cases. Sure. And when you do that, they were in favor of Innocent II.
But he wasn't. He was the antipope. And how did we find out that Anacletus II was the antipope? A saint.
Not just a saint. Not just a saint. Europe. Okay? The majority of the faithful. Not just a saint. Because you remember during the Western Schism, you have some saints who are siding with the antipopes. That's not good enough then, right? So how do you identify the real Pope, right?
Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, also Peter the Venerable, said, no, Anticletus II is not the real Pope. Pope Innocent II, he is the real Pope. Now, Innocent II wasn't even in Rome, and most of the cardinals were against him. But Anticletus was assumed. Now, eventually, Anticletus died, and it was worked out, and everybody recognized they followed St. Bernard.
No. It was worked out while Anticletus was still alive. He conceded that Innocent II was actually the Pope because the majority of Europe accepted Innocent II. He doesn't even give the account right. And he's going to use this as if it's somehow a response to what I was saying about the visibility of the church, which it's not.
Clairvaux, because he was a saint. Oh, wow, Anticletus II wasn't the real Pope. Innocent II was the real Pope. I use this example from history because it shows that in the history of the church, most of the cardinals and the people of Rome, I don't know what the actual poll was if you had polled all of Christendom, but for 8 years, you have an anti-pope in Rome. They think he's the legit one.
How many Sedevacantists are listening to this and can use this argument now against Taylor Marshall? I'm just saying, be consistent. Do you know how many Sedevacantists right now are listening to you who can now go and use, thank you, Dr. Marshall, that's a really good argument, and they're going to now go and use this against you. And if you can't differentiate yourself from the Sedevacantists, you might have a bad argument.
These things can't happen. I've heard certain people say, well, if you did.
And by the way he tries to differentiate himself from the Sedevacantists in a little bit, which doesn't even actually successfully do that, is he says that, you basically, you go to the people that are in union with Our Lady, which the Orthodox have a strong devotion to Our Lady. So do Sedevacantists. So that doesn't really, we'll get to that in a little bit. But for him, epistemologically, that's how you identify the true church whenever you're in times of trouble. Where is Our Lady being venerated? Go there. You got that with Eastern Orthodox. You got that with Sedevacantists. They're praying the rosary daily too.
Deny the visibility of the church, or you deny the visibility of the Pope at any time, you are teaching that the church can defect. And that's
not actually what I said. I didn't even, that's not what I said, but you can tell he's trying to respond to me because that was similar to something that I was saying, but not actually that. Because you'll notice in my interview with Gordon, I do mention the Western Schism, right? I do mention that.
Actually not true. There have been large periods of time where provinces and bishops didn't know the name of the Pope. It wasn't.
Yeah, I know that. But there's a difference between not knowing the name of a Pope and not being able to know the name of the Pope. Fundamental difference. And that's what I was getting at. You want to know why I was getting at that? Well, it's because of that part that you weren't listening to, that part that you didn't read from Vigano, because it seems like Vigano is saying that the Antichrist is going to sit on the chair of St. Peter. And then my point then is, if the Antichrist is on the chair of St. Peter, where's the real Pope? Right? You can't find him if the Antichrist is the one on the chair of St. Peter. Because how do you know where the center of the church is? The center of unity, as Gasser was saying? You go to he who is sitting on the chair of St. Peter. But if the Antichrist is sitting on the chair of St. Peter, how are we going to identify the very center of the church? That was my point when it came to visibility. That's what I was getting at. He's not addressing that. He's completely misunderstanding because he's not even paying attention.
Visible to them. They were still Catholic. They were still in communion with Rome. There were 8 years in Rome where most of the cardinals were following an antipope. During the Great Schism, a third of people are following one antipope, a third are following another antipope, and a third are following the real pope.
Yeah. Go listen to where I responded to that because you didn't listen the first time. Go listen to where I already answered that one.
Even St. Vincent Ferrer was following an antipope at one point. Can you say that it was obvious that there was a definite visual distinction between those three groups of people? No, it does get confusing.
I'm no doubt. I would say there's some times where identifying the valid pope is a little bit more difficult than normal. And I gave you the Western Schism as an example. But even during that time, you could still know the true pope. You could still know the valid pope, and he was still visibly known, right? It's not like the false pope is sitting on the chair of St. Peter and that's it. No. You could have somebody claiming to sit on the chair of St. Peter and then somebody else who's actually sitting on the chair of St. Peter. And now in that case, how do you differentiate them? How do you identify them? Okay, that's a wonderful question, but that's not really interacting with what I'm ultimately getting at whenever I'm talking about the visibility of the church, because it was in context of Vigano who's saying the Antichrist, apparently, seemingly saying the Antichrist is sitting on the chair of St. Peter. And then my point is, well, where is the real pope? How do I identify him if some false pope is sitting on the chair of St. Peter? Newsflash, anti-popes don't sit on the chair of St. Peter. So you can't use an anti-pope as a response to what I'm saying. Anti-popes do not sit on the chair of St. The chair of St. Peter is something literal, right? But usually when we're talking about it, it's not something literal. We're talking about an office. Anti-popes don't hold the office of the chair of St. Peter. We do understand that, right? So you can't point me to an anti-pope in response to my concern here with what Vigano is saying, where it seems like he's saying the Antichrist will actually sit on the chair of St. Peter. Not that he will appear, but will sit on it. What does it mean? It will be the sect that occupies the see of most blessed Peter. Anti-popes don't do that. They don't occupy the seat of Peter. So what is he talking about? That's what I'm getting at when it comes to identifying the church and its visibility. Moreover, I have a question, Dr. Marshall. Here's my question for you. Denzinger 1793. It's quoting from De Filius, paragraph or chapter 3, I believe. Here's what it says. Moreover, in order that we may satisfactorily perform the duty of embracing the true faith and of continuously persevering in it, so that we could embrace the true faith and endure in it, through his only begotten Son, he's instituted the church and provided it with clear signs of his institution, so that it can be recognized by all, that includes during the Western Schism, as the guardian and teacher of the revealed word. How do we apply that? How do we apply that in light of what Vigano seems to be saying? If an anti-pope is sitting on the chair of St. Peter, how is what Vatican I here is saying true? How do I identify the true institution? And the answer that you gave about, we'll go to the people that are venerating Mary, that doesn't work. The schismatics are doing that too. That doesn't work. But what does work is what Gasser was saying at Vatican I, which the bishops accepted, and that is that he who sits in the chair of St. Peter is the sign of unity and is how you identify the church. It's not the only way to identify its visibility, but it's one of the ways. You got to deal with that. You have to interact with that. Now, he might say, well, I mean, by visibility is just talking about the fact that you'll actually see the people, right? I mean, okay. Here's something for you then. Van Noort, who addresses that himself. Because that's actually what the Protestants say. Here's Van Noort, good old manualist, preconciliar manualist. That the church is visible follows necessarily from the fact that it is a real society, for there can be no genuine society in the world of men unless it be visible. No one denies that the church's members are visible. Even Protestants affirm that, for they are flesh and blood people. But some do question whether by the institution of Christ himself these members are bound together by external bonds so as to form a society that can be perceived by the senses, a society of such a nature that one readily discerns who belongs to it and who does not. How can that be true in light of what it seems Vigano is saying is my question whenever I'm talking about visibility? And by the way, let me just go ahead and ask the question. How is what I just read from Van Noort and what I just read from Denzinger quoting Vatican I true in the case of Anacletus II in his time? And how is it true in the time of the Western Schism? Those are questions that I have, because Dr. Marshall is going to give you the impression that, yeah, it's just so unclear. There's times where you really just can't identify the church because you can't really identify the Pope here. So it's absurd to try to say that the visibility of the church is tied up in the papacy, even though that's what Gazert is saying at Vatican I. But hey, let's just skip that. But okay, let's just take that for the moment. How then do you identify the church in these troubling times, such as the Western Schism? How then do you make sense of Vatican I, Gasser, Van Noort, and I could give you many, many more. How then do you identify it if what I'm saying is not true? And again, it was all in the context of what Vigano seemed to be saying, and that was, it seems like he's saying that the Antichrist is going to sit in the chair of St. Peter, which then does destroy the visibility of the church. Okay? Because then you don't have anybody else sitting in the chair of St. Peter if he is sitting in the chair of St. Peter. You don't have two people sitting in it. And again, anti-popes don't sit in the chair of St. Peter, so don't give me examples of anti-popes. Irrelevant to what I'm discussing. So here again, it seems like Dr. Marshall's not listening. He's not paying attention. He's just giving these knee-jerk responses, and he's not carefully considering what's being said. And some of these arguments end up lending itself to some of the enemies of the church, unfortunately. Let's see. I want to go to minute 57. Let's start right around here, 56:30.
To the cross. St. John's my patron saint. Even though he was at the cross with Our Lady and saw Jesus died and saw the water and the blood come out, even on Easter Sunday.
He's going to give you now epistemic certitude. Y'all ready? All y'all pay attention. Here we go. Something we talk about all the time. How do you know? I mean, you're struggling right now with should you become Catholic? Should you become Orthodox? Should you become Sedevacantist? Should you be Protestant? You're struggling with epistemology. How do you know where the truth is? Here's the advice that we're being given during the time of crisis. Here it is.
Sunday, when he ran to the tomb, he outran Peter. Even then, it says that they didn't yet believe, but Mary did. I would suggest that the true visibility, the true confidence, the epistemic certitude of knowing that you're with Christ in a time of uncertainty is, are you united with Our Lady?
Sir, that applies to the Eastern Orthodox. They are claiming to also be united with Our Lady by all kinds of devotions to the Virgin. So are Sedevacantists. They have rosaries too, by the way. Just in case you didn't know. They have rosaries too, and they pray on too. So they're going to claim they're united to Our Lady, okay? What it is you've already identified where the Catholic Church is, and then you're just, you're shooting the arrow at the wall, and then you're drawing the target around it. That's all you're doing. But then I'm saying, wait, Eastern Orthodox fit on this target, so that doesn't work. Sedevacantists fit on this target. That doesn't work. So if you're giving me criteria that applies to schismatics, it's not good criteria. Now, what he's saying is great. I mean, yes, go to Our Lady, have devotions to her, pray the rosary. All that's great. I'm not saying that's bad. I mean, it's good advice, but it's not epistemic certitude, as he just called it. That's the problem, because it doesn't work. Others can claim that too. You know what they can't claim, though? The chair of St. Peter. Sedevacantists can't claim that. They don't have anybody sitting on the chair of St. Peter. Eastern Orthodox can't do that. They don't have anyone sitting on the chair of St. Peter, not in the way that we understand it. They would say every local bishop is, but that's a very different kind of claim than what we're saying about the chair of St. Peter. They don't have that. So there is a way to identify the true church during troubling times. There is a way. It's wrapped up in the visibility of the papacy, as Gasser tells you in the Relatio at Vatican I. And he's not the only one. But here you have interpretive authority for an ecumenical council. That counts for something. What of that argument? And that's what I was trying to respond to what Vigano appears to be saying, because I'm saying that then destroys the visibility of the church if the Antichrist is sitting in the chair of St. Peter, because I recognize the chair of St. Peter is the sign of unity, and it is what distinguishes us from the others. And so that is an objective way that you can identify the true church during this troubling time.
Do you pray the rosary every day? Pray the rosary every day. You're not on the team. You must stay close to Our Lady. There are so many promises to praying the rosary, to receiving the final graces, to receiving the final sacraments, to not falling into sin, to not becoming reprobate.
As if Sedevacantists don't pray the rosary.
You know, when Simeon talks about how she will be a sign for the rise and fall of many, this is the kind of thing that's happening here. Do not hear me, by the way, do not hear me say today that the papacy is not important, the College of Cardinals is not important, Rome.
Nobody's saying you're not saying it's not important, but what you are saying is it's not epistemically the certain way to identify where the church is during the time of crisis. That is, though, what you're saying.
Not important. The episcopate is not important. Apostolic succession is not important. Do not hear me say that. I believe in all that, and I affirm all of that. But if you ever find yourself in a time of persecution where you can't get to Mass, you can't get to sacraments, you don't know who the local bishop is, or if there is a local bishop, if there are no priests around, if you're ever in that situation, that doesn't mean that the church has ceased to exist. What it means is you just stay close to Our Lady. It's a path.
Well, nobody's saying the church ceases to exist if you as an individual can't find who your local bishop is. Nobody's claiming that. But that local bishop could be identified, objectively speaking. He could be identified, right? And more importantly, the Pope could be objectively identified. Just because you don't know who the Pope is doesn't mean that we can't objectively know who the Pope is. Two different things. And guess what?
Church.
If the Antichrist is sitting on the chair of St. Peter, he's actually in his office, you don't have a true Pope. Your true Pope is the Antichrist. You don't have another true Pope. You don't have somebody else who's sitting on the chair of St. Peter. Two people don't sit on the chair of St. Peter.
That's going to happen. But I know it has happened to Catholics and Christians over time. And I know that that's how they got through it. You stay close to the Mother of God. She says, my soul magnifies the Lord. You can't see Christ. You can't see the church. It seems dark. Put on the magnifying glasses.
Definitely go to the Virgin Mary in troubling times, but this is not going to give you epistemic certitude for the reasons why I've already said. All right. I want to shift gears here a little bit and go to something else. Let me pull it up here. Well, you know what? I want to get the screenshots of it. So let's take just a real quick break while I pull them up, because we're going to talk about Father David Nix next. So let me get that. But first, a little quick skit by Fawaz. So.
Dude, just watched my first video on the upcoming tribulation, and now it feels like I know everything. It feels like I was infused with all knowledge regarding this specific topic. It's crazy. I gotta buy some land and then build a bunker. Dude, I think you should build a shelter. Dude, you know I would, but with my luck, the 3 days of darkness will happen mid-project. Dude, even though I'm probably not in the state of grace, it kind of feels like it because of all the knowledge I have about this topic. Marie Julie Jahani. I'm so scared. It's time for a total consecration.
Hey, Papa.
Uh-huh.
What kind of movies do you want to watch for Christmas?
Well, it all depends on what kind of movies they have at the FEMA camps. Are these all the beeswax candles we own? Yep. That should last us a half an hour. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. When was your last confession? I don't remember. Go ahead. Okay, so when I was 14, Yeah, just drained my savings. Bought about 20 acres. Well, now what?
That's so funny, dude. Okay, I got the screenshots for y'all. Let's first of all start with this one. The main thing that I was going to address several days ago, I had intended to address Father David Nix's comments on the Catechism of the Council of Trent being infallible, because several people asked me, including patrons, to address this. So I just said, let me do a show on it. So here it is. But before I could get to that, I now got to address something else that happened this morning with Father David Nix. This is all public, by the way. Share my screen here. Y'all can go see it on Twitter. Father David Nix says, extremely wise Greek Orthodox priest here in this must-watch 11-minute video of C19V and totalitarianism in the Book of the Apocalypse. And he references a video where Father Heers, who's an Eastern Orthodox priest, is likening the vaccine to the mark of the beast in the Book of Revelation, or the Apocalypse, whatever you want to call it. Evidently, to Father David Nix, this is just the greatest thing ever, to liken the vaccine to the mark of the beast. I'm okay. That's not a comment on the vaccine being good. You can maintain that it's bad and still not say that it's the mark of the beast. That's something else, or at least likened to the mark of the beast, right? I mean, Father Heers does kind of give some qualifications in there. But they're quoting from a Orthodox saint from Mount Athos, Saint Paisios, who is saying if you receive the inoculation, you'll be marked by the beast. So at least seems to be his view that the vaccine is the mark of the beast. Again, somehow Father thinks that this is extremely wise. But just as troubling is Father saying that Peter Heers is an extremely wise Greek Orthodox priest. Extremely wise. Really? Well, that makes sense if you don't know anything about Father Peter Heers. But if you do, you would know this. I responded to him, a priest who thinks your orders are invalid and believes your saints are demonically inspired, because they believe, some of these people believe, St. Francis of Assisi, for example, was under prelist. Your discernment in who is wise is concerning. And watch what Father says in response to me. You can't make this up. That priest, talking about Father Heers, is not a monk of Mount Athos. Okay, that's true, although he's quoting one. And the plot thickens there, and as I'm going to show you here in a moment. So I doubt he believes that. In other words, Father doesn't actually know what Peter Heers believes. But he's an extremely wise priest. Okay. Well, I then have to explain to Father Nix with just two quotes, or articles, I should say, posted by Father Heers in the last 2 days. So this is not something you have to go and dig for, Father. You could find this pretty easily. In the last 2 days, Father Heers has posted several articles, one by St. Paisios, right, or Paisios. One by him, and then one by another Orthodox saint, both saying that Latin baptisms are invalid. You can't make this up. Literally, in the last 2 days, he's sharing the saints that are actually, one of them's from Mount Athos, irony here, who are saying this. And Father Heers is sharing it because that's actually what he believes. He's told me that. Whenever I was discerning orthodoxy, he told me personally that I have to go and get rebaptized. Shouldn't be just chrismated, received by chrismation. I need to go get rebaptized. So I know he maintains that view. And here he's sharing posts clearly affirming that view. Oddly enough, one of the stories was by an Orthodox saint who disobeys his synod, because the synod said in the story that you're not to rebaptize the Latins. You're to receive them by chrismation. Well, the saint just said, oh, no. I know better than that. I know what Scripture teaches. And so I'm going to go and baptize them. So he does. He disobeys his synod. I'm not sure how that's attestation to sanctity, but okay, whatever. So last 2 days, we see that. It's clear that's what he believes. Just a few months ago, I was arguing with Father. I say argue. I was trying to respond to Father, who was claiming that St. Francis and other saints are basically under prelist. So saying the exact same thing that I tried to tell him, which Father clearly doesn't know he believes, but he could have found out very easily if he just looked at a little bit of what Father Ayres says. Somebody says, Michael Lofton has no idea what he's talking about here. The akriva is baptism into the church. Yeah, evidently you actually don't know what you're talking about. We've discussed this many times, but I'm just discussing the opinion here of Father Ayres. So it's actually you who's misinformed here. Anyways, notice, first of all, his argument. That priest is not a monk of Mount Athos. So I guess if you're a monk outside of Mount Athos, you can't believe in rebaptism. You couldn't believe. Now, obviously, they believe it's baptism the first time. They don't believe it's being rebaptized, right? But I guess you couldn't maintain that view if you're outside of Mount Athos. So for him, it's like only the guys on Mount Athos believe this. It's just, wow, you really don't know anything about orthodoxy, do you? And yet, the very guy that you're saying is this wise priest thinks your orders are, he doesn't even think you're a Christian. You're not even validly baptized, Father, in his eyes. And you just gave him a ringing endorsement. And what happens is people go and then watch this stuff and they buy into it. And then they end up getting misled and leaving the Catholic Church. Because here you have a Catholic priest lauding and endorsing somebody he doesn't know anything about, who is actually leading Catholics away from Catholicism into the Orthodox Church and rebaptizing them. Now, I'm not saying he personally rebaptizes them. You know what I mean? Which, of course, is sacrilege, right? I mean, if somebody has been validly baptized, to administer baptism again is sacrilegious. So this isn't a minor issue. This is very important. It is offensive to God to baptize again. Now, they don't believe they're baptizing again. I understand that. But objectively speaking, if what we're saying is true, it is then sacrilegious. I found this, though, ironic. A wise priest who doesn't even believe you are a Christian. Nice. Well, evidently, Father, like I said, didn't even look into him. But here's my question. You just gave a ringing endorsement of somebody who no Catholic should recommend. Okay. But you would want to criticize Pope Francis for some of the controversial endorsements he's had, right? Some of the people that he's endorsed that he had no business endorsing, you would rightly criticize Pope Francis for it. And yet, you're doing the very same thing. So my advice would be to maybe look further into people before you give a ringing endorsement of them. But even if somehow, Father Ayres came out clean on everything else, how is this wisdom, what's being peddled here in this video, how is this wisdom? I'm at a loss on that one. Okay, that was the first part from Father Nix that I needed to address. The next one was April 24th. The Catechism of the Council of Trent is the only catechism ever declared by a pope to be infallible. Huh? Therefore, to write publicly against it makes you a material heretic, in this case, a blasphemer against the Holy Theotokos. Well, I completely agree. You shouldn't be writing against the Catechism of the Council of Trent. Everything in there is, well, I say everything. There were a couple things that the church has dialed back a little bit. Very, very minor things that the church, and in the preconciliar era, by the way, not in post-Vatican II. There are a couple things that the church in the preconciliar era qualified here and there, but for the most part, I would agree that, the Catechism of the Council of Trent is great. There's nothing unsafe in there, by the way. Some of those things that they dialed back and changed on is not something, it's like, oh, it was unsafe, though. No. There's nothing unsafe in the Catechism of the Council of Trent. And 99.9% of it is still attested to by the Catholic Church in the preconciliar era and the postconciliar era. So I don't have a problem with it, and I agree nobody should be writing against the Catechism of the Council of Trent. Likewise, they shouldn't be writing against most things that they find in the current catechism, which I don't think Father would agree with me on that. But declared by a pope to be infallible? What? What? Now, again, I know that, your average priest doesn't tend to know a whole lot about the magisterium, but man, that's quite the statement. Really? Well, I tried to find out, okay, what exactly is he talking about? It seems that he is referring to this encyclical by Clement the 13th. It seems, I don't know, maybe he can clarify, but it seems like this is what he's talking about. Especially the part that says, therefore, in the case the church should be deceived. Let me pull it up here. Yeah. Therefore, in case the church should be deceived and wander after the flocks of the companions who are themselves wanderers and unsettled with no certainty of truth, who are always learning, but never arriving at the knowledge of truth. They propose that only what is necessary and very useful for salvation be clearly and plainly explained in the Roman Catechism and commuted to the faithful. That is not a declaration that everything in it is infallible. That is not a declaration, first of all. At the very least, it means that what is in there is safe, which I agree. It is safe. Wholeheartedly, I affirm that. And I would also say 99.9% of it is true. The only parts I would contest are anything that in the post-conciliar, pre-conciliar era that they qualified. That's the only thing. But again, notice what it says. They propose that only what is necessary and very useful for salvation be clearly and plainly explained in the Roman Catechism. So what's useful and necessary. And I would say that includes, that includes everything in the Catechism. That's not saying, however, that everything in there is taught definitively, because some things could be taught that are safe, but are then qualified or even reversed later. And I'm talking about very minor things here, as we've seen with the Council of Florence in the matter of the form of the sacrament of the priesthood that was qualified by Pope Pius XII. And we don't even have to say that there was a necessary contradiction there either. We could talk about a reversal instead. But I mean, what Florence is saying isn't unsafe or harmful for salvation, right? And then even says, but even though this book be composed with remarkable work and effort, was universally approved and welcomed with the highest praises. Let me find that part. Yeah. But even though this book, composed with remarkable work and effort, was universally approved and welcomed with the highest praises, maybe he's talking about this part. Universally approved doesn't necessarily mean that everything in it is infallible, though. That's my thing. So to say what we see here, only one to be declared by a pope to be infallible, makes me wonder what else is Father saying that needs to be questioned. Now, I don't know a whole lot about Father Nix. I've seen a couple things here and there. I haven't looked a whole lot into him. But the few things that people are bringing to my attention, I'm seeing mistakes. I'm seeing errors. I'm seeing bad judgments in discerning characters and discerning material. I'm seeing some questionable stuff. So I am going over this so that y'all maybe get another end. Y'all get another perspective. Somebody says Michael is still talking about this catechism stuff while the war is happening in the comments. Well, what's going on in the comments? Let's maybe take a look at that. Y'all send me some chat questions, and I can engage them. Tell me what's going on. Any questions that y'all may have. Father Nix clearly doesn't view St. Paul, John Paul II's promulgated catechism to be infallible in any sense. Well, even with the catechism, the current catechism, it doesn't mean that everything in it is infallible either, right? I mean, as Ratzinger notes, I mean, what's in the catechism carries the same weight that it had previously outside of the catechism. And that's true. I would qualify what Ratzinger is saying, though. Yes, that's true once it shows up in the catechism, But what happens if it remains in the catechism for a long time uncontested? Isn't there some kind of reception there that increases the weight of it? I would argue yes. Somebody says I got some super chats. I didn't see any questions in the super chats, so let me know if I missed them. Somebody said, Lofton, what was it like growing up in the projects? Well, Israeli government funded buildings and project communities are very different than in the United States. So I grew up around I grew up mainly I lived in different places in Israel, but I mean, my most memorable experience there was in the absorption center, and it was mostly Ethiopians who came to Israel. It was mostly Ethiopians, but there were some non-Ethiopians there, but that's generally the people that I was around. As far as what was it like, a lot of fighting, a lot of poverty. In fact, I found some pictures online. I was trying to find some pictures on Google Maps of the area. I found some pictures of it may not have been the actual unit that I lived in, but it's one of them, like maybe one that was right next door, because I don't exactly remember which one it was, but it's one of them. So I found them. Maybe I'll do a show. I'll go over some of the places I lived there in Israel. Restoring the Faith wants to get in touch with you. He was just in the chat, but he left now. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see that. If you can maybe just send me an email, I think that would be good. What was this? Moved on me. Hold on. Okay, Restoring the Faith wants you on one of his shows to talk about Vatican II. Okay, I'll see if I can get in touch with him. But if y'all can maybe let me know what were the questions in the super chat. I saw a couple super chat comments. I didn't see any questions, and it's disappeared on me since then. If y'all can maybe let me know. Somebody saying go on Restoring the Faith. Yeah. Yeah. How did Luther affirm the indefectibility of the church if he believed the church was the whore of Babylon? Right. Well, he just redefined what the church in fact means, right? He just redefined what the church is. That's all. And I'm asking, is that what Vigano is doing? Is he redefining it? And I would say, if he's saying that the Antichrist sits in the chair of St. Peter, yes, you've now redefined what the church means. You have now done that. But I don't know for sure if that's what he's saying. Maybe it's just poorly worded. Okay, that happens. We all poorly word things. But I'm just asking for clarification. Because if you're going to criticize Pope Francis for poorly wording things and then not coming out and clarifying them, but then you're poorly phrasing things and not coming out and clarifying them, you're doing the same thing that Pope Francis is doing. So don't be like Pope Francis. Come out and clarify what you meant. And if you mean that, okay, no, I'm not saying that the Antichrist is sitting in the chair of St. Peter. Okay, then my question is, what are you saying? And I'll accept it. I mean, if the guy says, hey, this is not what I meant, I have no reason to not believe what he meant, what he says he meant. That's fine. And we'll come and do another show and talk about it. And I'll say, hey, Vigano doesn't mean that. Wonderful. Great news. But until then, I have questions. Okay. Do I have an email that people could reach out to me with? Yes. reasonandtheology@gmail.com. reasonandtheology@gmail.com. Or you could just go to reasonandtheology.com and just click on the Contact Us page. It'll be there. Absorption Center sounds like something out of the Matrix. What an absorption center. It was in Mevaseret Zion, which is right outside of Jerusalem. But I mean, I lived in different places, different times, right? But this is the second time I lived there when I first got there. The absorption center. Sorry, let me. Okay. In fact, I got to go in just a second here. But hold on. Let me respond to this because this is a important one. The absorption center, what it is if you convert to Judaism, which my mom did at that time, if you convert to Judaism and you want to make Aliyah, which is you're basically being transferred to the Holy Land so you can live there, they'll provide for you to be able to go there so that you can live in the Holy Land and practice your faith. and they bring you into an absorption center, and you kind of make your way out of there. So, yeah, that was effectively it. Let me take this super chat real quick, then I got to go. A lot of trads SSPX say that the Lefebvre situation has precedent with Saint Irenaeus and the Arian crisis. Are the two comparable? Absolutely not. No. Athanasius was never going against the Pope. Now, you could argue that maybe Pope Liberius, under duress, signed maybe a semi-Arian creed, but it's odd that Athanasius actually defended Liberius, so can't really compare to that one. Now, that doesn't mean that Lefebvre is just some horrible person. I think that Lefebvre is more a symptom of the problem. I think he was more of a victim. I think he did make some bad decisions, but 2020 is hindsight. Although I don't think that that means it removes all excusability from him. I think that some like he shouldn't have gone through with the ordinations, for example. But aside from that, I think that he did do some good, and he's really wasn't the problem at the time. He was hardly the problem. He was more reacting to the problem. Lefebvre's not the issue. If we didn't have such terrible, from the top down, such terrible chaos going on at that time, and some bad prudential decisions, you would have never had a Lefebvre. There would have been no reason. If things had just been done better from top down, we wouldn't have had this problem. But unfortunately, they weren't done very well. So we had Lefebvre. Again, that's not a ringing endorsement of him. It's also not, excusing him either. But he's not a St. Athanasius. He's also not a Martin Luther. I think both of those are, I wouldn't put them in either category. I'd just kind of place him somewhere in the middle. This is a good guy making some bad decisions on occasion because he's really frustrated with what he sees going on. And at some occasions, he went too far by actually calling the true church a schismatic church, being rhetorical. I think that was wrong. He shouldn't be calling the true church schismatic, saying that the church is in schism from me and stuff like that. No, I think that goes a little too far. And you can see that in some of the episodes we've done on Lefebvre. But then I've also had SSPX priests on, and I get their side of the story. I think it's important to hear both. Point is, I don't think we should be focusing really on the SSPX at this point. Though there are some matters of concern there, they're not ultimately the problem. Now, you might say, well, traditional Catholics aren't ultimately the problem. True, but I would say that I think some of this stuff that we're seeing from some traditional Catholics who are reacting to some things is leading people outside of the church. And I don't see that as much with the SSPX. I know it happens on occasion, but I don't see it as much. I am seeing it more in this unbalanced approach that I'm seeing with some reactionary Catholics. So I'm trying to deal with that while at the same time deal with Eastern Orthodoxy's criticism, while at the same time deal with Protestants on the show, and while at the same time doing roundtables and debates and interviews and everything else. So anyways, I hope that was helpful. I apologize I can't get to the rest of the questions. I got to run. But we'll do another one tomorrow. I appreciate y'all all for watching and participating there. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this on your social media, and also check us out, patreon.com/Reason and Theology if you want to support us and also get extra content. God bless.